Healer! Healer! Men rushed into the tent again, urgently shouting, followed by the stretcher-bearers. Opherantus was used to this already. These few years of war had hardened her for these situations, and she replied with a loud but calmer voice, over the consistent screams and shouts in the packed field hospital. Here, put him down here. The group of human warriors and camp followers helped the stretcher-bearers to slowly put down the patient on a makeshift operating table, still bloody from the last patient. It was a young Cervenian knight, barely over his 20s. His helmet was already removed, and from the state of his armour and face, she knew things were terrible. The previously gold-ornated steel had now been battered to scrap metal. His right pauldron was gone, exposing a few strands of fabrics that were once his army doublet, and the shoulder underneath was a bloody mess. His face was an unhealthy pale, and covered in terrific wounds. Lips darkened, blood was seeping out of his nose and mouth with every weak breath. Specific condition? She asked as she checked his pulse, half knowing the answer already. Through the panting voice, one of his retinues answered, Quicksilver poisoning. The 9th one she has seen today. Please, do what you can to save our lord, the squire pleaded. A sudden surge of rage almost overcame Opherantus. Her hands clutched into a fist, attempting her best to contain it. I will. Now get out, all of you. You will only get in the way. But out, now! I don't have time for this, nor does your master. With reluctance, the group of retinue left. Opherantus began to shout out orders for her assistance. Everyone was quick-paced. There was no time for delicacy now. They had to cut the leather armor strips first to treat the physical wound, and by the looks of the battered armor and blood leaking from the armor joints, it must be bad. At the same time, Opherantus prepared the proper healing spells and potions for detoxification, with quicksilver poisoning every second counts. When they finally cut loose his armor and removed the cuirass, even Opherantus gasped. His body was covered in every wound possible. Cuts, tears, bruises, dislocations, broken bones and burns. Not to mention heatstroke from continuous fighting in a suit of metal. Opherantus could not imagine what he had been through. Whatever hell this knight had endured and survived. She immediately began chanting the required spells to stop the bleeding, while her assistant tried to clean the wound to assist with the healing, and feed the knight water and an anti-toxin potion. But nothing was working. The young knight's wounds were too severe. The quicksilver had likely done too much damage to his body for it to heal. Even with the best Kyrthenian healing magic and potions, his pulse and breath grew weaker with every moment that passed. No. Stay with me, you human bastard, Opherantus muttered under her breath. I'm not letting you die here, not after whatever hell you have come through. Opherantus stood closer, putting her hands closer to his body, pouring more mana and psychic focus onto her chants, hoping that the healing magic will drag the young human knight back from the gates of death. Suddenly, the young knight took Opherantus by surprise and grabbed her arm, with the strength that a dying human should not have. He dragged Opherantus closer to himself and spoke. Where are the Kithrians? Did they retreat successfully? He struggled with every word, wheezing breath between his weak speech. Yes, they did. Opherantus put a rougher hand on his and answered. You should rest now, you have suffered terrible wounds. Good. The edge of his mouth jerked slightly upwards as he relaxed his head back, his brows no longer twitching with pain. The young knight's voice slowly faded away with a relieved and satisfied tone. And then his breath ceased. The grip on Opherantus' forearm loosened. The human's hand slowly slipped away, and his arm dropped down the edge of the makeshift operating table. Opherantus sat by the bank of the small river around the camp. Her shift had ended, and she was relieved by another healer, Prima. She was tired, but she could not bring herself to rest. She looked down and slowly rubbed her right forearm. Though the finger marks had long since faded, the gripping sensation of the young human knight still lingered. Grand Healer Opherantus. It was the human surgeon, Angenita. She was exhausted as well, with the same fatigued and blooded face that Opherantus had seen many times. Mind if I sit here too? Opherantus shook her head and turned back towards the river again. Angenita sat down slowly with a grunt. She rubbed her hands together, trying to formulate something to say, and eventually she let out a deep breath and spoke. I've heard about Sir Bayard. You've done your best. Do not feel bad about it. Francis knew the surgeon was merely trying to comfort her, and she was grateful about it. But that odd sense of anger began to creep up again, and she couldn't help herself but to ask, "Why'd you let them use it?" "I beg your pardon?" The human surgeon's head turned, her expression clearly confused. "The quicksilver. Why'd you let them use it?" Francis repeated again, this time with a bit more agitation. "No one let them use it," the surgeon answered, with an awkward chuckle. "They are knights. They let themselves use whatever they want." "But did you not warn them about it? That it will kill them?" "Oh, I did. We all did, in fact. Every scholar did. But they do not care." Though this explanation did not quite quell Francis's anger, it did shock her. "Listen, Grand Healer. You might think of us as warmongering lunatics that have no regard for ourselves or our people." The human surgeon's tone began to become more serious, and she turned her whole body towards Francis, looking her directly in the eyes. "We have no magic of your kind. The dexterity of the elves, the strength of the giants, and all the sorcery of the corporants. We are human, and what we are is what we have, and whatever we can utilize, we will do so. This is how we survive. This is how we win wars. These knights came to fight for your people because they believe it is righteous and just, and they will do whatever it takes to win, as it is the only way. Whatever it takes, no matter the cost." 5 hours ago, River Kaflar. "Sir Bayard! Sir Bayard! Maestro Spar has ordered a general retreat. The left is disengaged. The Tertio can't hold them." "What of the refugees? The Kirians have not finished the crossing yet?" Sir Bayard of Demar asked, meanwhile casually dispatching a corporate caprichat with his poleaxe. "The Maestro said we can't risk the entire Tertio. Whoever is left, only the Saints can save them now." The messenger answered in haste, then gave a quick salute and rode off, racing to relay the order. "Damn," Bayard muttered under his breath. Tercio di la Mereglia, di Asantio, had been engaged in battle for more than 5 hours non-stop, just to keep the Kaflar bridgehead open for Kirian refugees to retreat. Now that they were so close to salvation, their saviour would abandon them to their fates? "This cannot do. I will not bear this shame to abandon the innocent to these savages." "Master Gallio, tell me how much time I have left for the runes." The knight turned to his mage retinue. "Sir, I must warn you that if you—" But before the mage could finish his protest, the young knight interrupted him. "Just tell me how much time." The mage retinue reached out his hand and placed it on Sir Bayard's armor, momentarily closing his eyes to concentrate. "My liege, you have approximately 1 hour left with this amount of quicksilver, but I must insist, sir, that prolonged use of—" "Will kill me. I'm aware, Master Gallio." The runic circuit activated. The runes etched in Oz, Sylvanian, and linear circuit glowed. Sir Bayard could feel power pulsing through him, as mana flowed throughout his armor, accompanied with a metallic sweetness in his mouth. "Master Gallio, tell the batteries under no circumstances they should stop firing and retreat unless the final line of the Spadone Vetrano has failed, and inform the Maestro I will buy the time for the refugees." His retinues bowed and hurried to their orders. There were no farewell words. They need none of such things. Bayard lowered his visor and readied his poleaxe. "Here we go, then." With a kick that shook the ground, he propelled himself into a great leap, crossing 100 paces within seconds and smashed into a densely packed corporate formation. The impact killed a dozen men outright. The rest blew away like dolls. Sir Bayard swung his poleaxe with augmented strength. The hammerhead caved in armor and turned corporate flesh into tenderized meat and mushed paste. Then something hit. Immense heat was what Bayard felt first, followed by the concussive blow. Something with the strength of a bull impacted his and knocked the wind out of him. The taste of metallic sweetness in his mouth went stronger, now with the addition of blood. He must keep moving. He must buy time for the retreat. 5 more minutes. Just 5 more minutes will do. His legs were still moving, pushing him forward. The armor must have held and the runes were still functional, feeding both the armor and him power. Ignoring the clang of arrows uselessly glancing off his armor, Bayard concentrated for his narrow visor, trying to locate the source of the attack. He caught the glimpse of red light with the corner of his vision slit. He instinctively blocked with his poleaxe. Years of training kicked in as muscle memory took over. The poleaxe exploded in splinters of wood and steel shards. It was a group of mages, 200 paces away, already chanting for the next attack spell. Then the ground around their position erupted, throwing up dirt and pink mist. Body parts flaked around, A Slovenian hunter-killer gun batteries precisely executed their anti-sorcerer tactics. But the salvo did not kill them all. There's one left. With a roar, Bayard threw the broken shot in his hand. The air boomed as it accelerated towards his target. The wooden pole impacted the shield bearers guarding the mage and smashed right through them, sending them flying, then hit the chanting mage with so much force his body was ripped in half. There was no pause between his movement, so Bayard was already moving. He drew his blade and leapt forward again, cutting his way through iron and sinew. Just 5 more minutes. Elite cataphracts and Janizar guards came for him, axe blades and mace flashing with armor-piercing sorcery, specifically to counter a fully armored human knight. Good. He had called the attention of the enemy now. Steel clashed and blows were exchanged. Rings and metal flakes flew in all directions, as enchanted chainmail and lamella were bashed through with sheer brute force. So Bayard gripped his longsword on the blade, using his crossguard and pobble as a temporary hammer, as cuts were of little effect. Just 5 more minutes. These creatures were but crude imitations of him, heavily armoured head to toe, and went through vigorous training for sure, but they were no knights. So Bayard was born into war. His sole purpose was war. To them this was an occupation. To him this is what he was made for. It was a part of his nature as if breathing air. But he was but one, and they were many. And the poison began to drag him down. Bayard forgot when he lost the sense of smell and taste, nor the sensation of pain. His hands were numb, and he struggled to breathe and had to consistently fight against the urge to remove this helm. Just 5 more minutes. The golem towered over him. With strength that could shatter fortress walls, his giant rocky digits curled into a fist and swung. It caught Sir Bayard in the right shoulder as he attempted to dodge the blow. It sent him flying, whirling in the air and crashing into the ground. There was no pain, but a sense of tiredness dragged Bayard down as if something dropped a mountain over him. His body was so heavy. His armor was so heavy. His eyelids were so heavy. His mind was murky and he could not even comprehend the ringing in his ears anymore. Where am I? I am tired. I must rest. No! The slam of the golem's feet snapped him awake. I must fight! Bayard could not sense his right arm anymore. Broken, cut away. And his vision was a mix of blurred images, but it does not matter. Now he must stand. To stand and fight. He clenched his teeth and attempted to push his body up. The runic circuit no longer glowed as brightly, and struggled to push the battered armor and broken knight up. Move, Bayard. You must move. If you will not fight, who will fight? If you do not stand, who will stand? You are the exemplar. You are the bastion. You must fight for those who can't. You are a knight. He roared and lifted himself up, staggering in the process. His blade was no longer with him, so he drew the dagger. Just 5 more minutes. The world was grey and silent. Bayard laid beside the golem's head, his dagger embedded deep in his face. He could no longer move, truly this time. He felt weightless yet heavy, as if his body no longer belonged to himself. The heat that burned him slowly died down, and it started to get colder and colder. And although the sensation of pain slowly slipped back, oddly not to the degree that was unbearable. A small breeze blew across his face. He did not know when his visor was smashed away, or perhaps he opened it himself. He did not remember, actually. He could not remember many things. But one question did linger in his mind. Did the refugees cross the river? He hoped that they did. He hoped the maestro of the tertio did listen to his retinues. He hoped he had done enough. He hoped he did buy them enough time. Just 5 more minutes. Darkness slowly crept up from the corners of his eyes. Bayard tried to fight it, but his mind had begun to drift as well. He could not focus anymore. Then, darkness, coldness, and silence.